But as it turned out, the FBI did, in conjunction with the Justice Department, pulled me to appear before a federal grand jury. And what it did was, it ruined my relationship with my editors. Eventually, it caused me to end my newspaper career at that time. I left the New York Times. I think about that now because, among other things, I had to walk away from was my pension, because at that time you had to have 10 years before you could be vested, and I was there about 8 or 9 years, and I had to leave the paper. Not because they told me I had to leave, but simply because I had to stop doing what I was doing because of all that I had been through. To make a long story short, what happened was the government got this subpoena for me to appear before the federal grand jury, which I said I would not do. At that time, in that late 1960s period, the black America was undergoing a cultural revolution. Black people went from being Negroes to black, and organizing around race. Black doctors, black lawyers, black police officers, black teachers, and in my area, black journalists. And we began to organize. And we had in New York a little group of black journalists called Black Perspective, which I believe was the first one that was organized. And when I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area to come out there to cover the Panthers, I joined with a little group of black journalists out there. Probably only about, I bet there was less than 10 of us. And we call ourselves the Bay Area Black, we either call ourselves the Bay Area Black Journalists or Bay Area Black Media Workers. I forget what it was. But we had a little organization. Indeed, we published a little newspaper, I told you about it, called Ball and Chain Review. They're classic little journals. But the subpoena that was issued was not issued to the New York Times. It was issued to me, Earl Caldwell, an individual. And so I found myself in a very difficult position because the New York Times said, well, let's try to work something out. We don't want this to go to court. Let's work something out. Although they did say, we're going to move to quash the subpoena. And what happened was they hired, and I remember the San Francisco Chronicle, which was the big newspaper in Northern California. They ran a big front page story that says, Times goes to prestigious law firm to defend Caldwell. And it was a big firm called Pillsbury, Madison, and Sutro. And they hired this law firm, and I remember going over there to meet with these lawyers. And I thought these people were going to defend me. And they had a guy named John Bates. And he said to me, look, I want you to bring all your materials that you've collected as a reporter over to our office. And let us go through everything. He said, we have a tremendous problem with law and order out here. And he said, I'm sure some of this stuff you got should go to the FBI. I was stunned. But also, it was the first time it began to hit me about what a difficult position that I was in. My mom called me. She says, why don't you just come home? Well, anyhow, I told my little group in the Black Journalists Association, and we're trying to figure out what to do and everything and how we can get a lawyer, but we had no resources, no nothing. And as it happened, the New York Association of Black Journalists and my colleagues in New York, they all knew me. We had all come up together. And the largest, probably, there were two major black journalist associations at that time. One was in New York and one was in Chicago. There was Lou Palmer out there, and I think he was the president of the group. And they were very strong because they had numbers, because Chicago had a lot of newspapers, and they had also hired a lot of blacks. But those two were the majors. The one in New York called me in California and said, we have got a lawyer for you, and